Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats so we can get started and stay on time and get you out of here as promised. Welcome to the first 2018 Chamber Forum. I'm Roy Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. It's my privilege to be sort of the MC and moderator this morning. We're really thrilled to have all of you join us for this first installment of our new chamber format. We listened to the members, we listened to what you said, and y'all said y'all want us to provide timely, relevant programming on news and issues that are impacting our community, so that's what this is all about. So we're providing members with monthly opportunities now to hear firsthand from the people who are influencing the changes in our community and who are truly making a difference in Central Oklahoma. We're here today to learn about the impact of the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center, which here in Oklahoma City employs about 7,500. Before we introduce our special guest this morning, I'd like to take a moment to recognize today's signature sponsor, which is Cox Business. So please welcome Eddie Blankenship, the Director of Sales with Cox Business, to the stage to say a few words. Eddie?
Good morning. Thanks for coming out in this wonderful, chilly weather today. For those that don't know me, my name is Eddie Blankenship. I am the new sales director for the Oklahoma City market. We at Cox Business are proud to sponsor this event, and we're proud to be a part of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. Cox Business prides ourselves in supporting the communities we serve. So thank you for coming out today, and thank you for allowing us this partnership. Enjoy the event.
Thank you, Eddie. We're also pleased to have our corporate sponsors who are ADG Inc. and Guernsey. Thank you all. Let's all thank them. So the Mike Monroney Center is the fourth largest single site employer in the state of Oklahoma. They have 3,600 civilian employees. They have 1,500 contractors. And they have about 1,200 students on site. They also produce an annual economic impact of about $1.65 billion, and the center is really a major part of local and state economies here. The center conducts a wide variety of missions that are critical to federal government operations, including but not limited to work for other federal agencies like the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Department of Defense. The work done by the center's staff and contractors, as well as the thousands annually trained at this particular center, generates very long-standing value and economic impact both nationally and internationally. The center offers the nation cost-effective and expert services on numerous fronts, and we're excited to hear about this critical work today from a great, fantastic lineup of speakers. But for now, please enjoy your lunch. We will regroup shortly to introduce the speakers and continue our program. So lunch will be served now. Well, please continue eating. In the interest of time, we're going to start the program, but please finish your meals. Feel free to do that. So as I mentioned, we're pleased to welcome the FAA here today, and specifically 4 executives from the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. Oklahoma's history is really very deep and rich in aviation, and aerospace is the second largest industry in our state, second only to the oil and gas sector. The average salary in the aerospace industry today is approximately $73,000 annually, and our state has managed to contribute numerous astronauts to the NASA program as well. The Aeronautical Center has played a vital role in the success of the aerospace industry in our state now for over 70 years. So with us today to tell us more about the Aeronautical Center and the important role that they play in the aerospace industry We have Michelle Coppage, the director of the Aeronautical Center. She oversees the operations of the center and works with an annual operating budget of a little over $1 billion. The center is the second largest Federal Aviation Administration facility outside of Washington, D.C. Keith Berry was recently named director of the FAA Academy, a premier accredited aviation technical training facility that instructs approximately 1,000 students per day and extends aviation training globally to over 170 different countries worldwide. We're also pleased to have Dr. Carla Hackworth joining us today. She's a manager and researcher in the Aerospace Human Factors Division at the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, known as CAMI. The Institute's primary mission is safety as it applies to pilots, flight attendants, air traffic controllers, and passengers, examining all aspects of human support in an aviation environment. And finally, Randall Burke is the director of the FAA's Logistics Center, which provides supply chain management and maintenance, repair, and overall of critical assets that support the national airspace system. It is the one and only, centralized distribution facility for all of the nation's aviation systems, managing over 66,000 national stock numbers to keep our airways safe. So, to get us started, please join me in welcoming Michelle Coppage to the podium. Michelle?
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Roy Williams. Thank you so much for facilitating this, and to the Oklahoma City Chamber. We really appreciate being able to come here today. Also to Eddie, thank you very much for helping to sponsor this event. So we are very excited about aviation. And I know that many of you probably know something about the FAA, but you may not know much about the Aeronautical Center. And I'm going to tell you, when I have traveled across Oklahoma and across this nation, a lot of times people say, "Gee, where is the Aeronautical Center, and what is this Monroney Aeronautical Center, and what do you guys do?" And so we kind of like to think of ourselves as the best kept secret across the state. The problem is, we don't want to really be a best kept secret. We really want the word to be out about what we do. And because we make a huge impact both locally, nationally, and we even influence internationally aviation across the world. We have pretty large economic impact as well, both here in the state and across this nation. And as Roy mentioned, we service a lot more than just the FAA. It's pretty intuitive that we support the FAA, but we actually support over 60 different federal agencies. So it's a pretty exciting time in aviation. Aviation in itself is one of the most dynamic and rapidly changing industries. And when you think about all the changes that have happened across this industry, I'd like you guys to think back for a minute to really appreciate where we're at. If some of you may have traveled in around 1970s, and I want you to think about this. If you went to the airport in 1970s time frame, and you walked into the airport, one of the first things that you could do is to buy life insurance. It would cost $5, and believe it or not, many passengers would sign up to do this. Overall safety. Now fast forward to where we're at now. 40 to 50 years later, there's not much of a concern. People tend to go to the airport now, and what are you concerned about? You're concerned more about TSA, the TSA lines, which, oh, by the way, TSA is not part of the FAA. I get that question all the time. You're concerned about either getting your baggage on time, maybe whether or not the flight's going to arrive on time. Those are the primary concerns. So we enjoy a time and a period when safety, we are the safest aerospace system in the world. And we're really the envy of many other countries because of that. And a lot of that success that has happened over the last 40 to 50 years is really a testament to a lot of things that happen at the Aeronautical Center right here in Oklahoma. And so we're very, very proud of that. And when we think about aviation, when we think about this dynamic changing, it's also a very interesting time in aviation. So let's think about what's going on across aviation. It's a time right now when aviation, and the pure definition of aviation, is really being questioned. What is aerospace? What is aviation? What does that really encompass? Right now, when you look across our industry, there are over 320,000 registered aircraft. And you add to that, there's over 1 million different drones. So let's think about this. It took over 100 years for us to get 320,000 registered aircraft across the national airspace. And now within just a 2-year time frame, there's over 1 million drones that have been added to that. And there's about 870,000 drones that are registered with hobbyists. So there's really over 1 million. So the industry and aviation is dynamically changing. It's changing right before our eyes, and it's changing very, very fast. And if you add into that commercial space on top of that, it used to be a really rare thing when you think about a company having a rocket that's being shot off to have a payload go up to the International Space Station. And now we're seeing rocket launches every week. And we may see them coming up several times a week going forward. So it's really changing. And you've got a lot of new entrants, a lot of new operators. And our job at the FAA is to really go in and create and manage a very effective and safe system and make sure it operates very efficiently and make sure it can accommodate all these different new entrants. And that's really what we're all about. And that's what the Aeronautical Center is about. So if we go on and let me talk about the center itself a little bit. If you go on to the next slide. Okay, we're very proud of our name. We are named after Senator Mike Monroney. And so our history is very important and it runs really, really deep. The Aeronautical Center actually is started all the way back in World War II as an Army depot. So we used to do maintenance and repair, and then we started doing some aspect of training. And then a very important event happened in 1956. Many of you probably know about this event. But there was a transworld airline that collided with a United Airlines. And 2 airplanes collided together. 128 people died over the Grand Canyon. Many of you have heard about this. And at that time, aviation had really changed quite a bit since World War II, and there were a lot more flights that were happening across the airspace. But there really wasn't any kind of regulatory body to take oversight and make sure that their didn't happen. And so Senator Monroney, he was in charge of the aviation subcommittee, and he introduced legislation in 1958 to create a Federal Air Act. And what was really interesting to me is he did it in June of 1958, and 2 months later, the president signed it into law. When does that ever happen? So it's pretty amazing that in 2 months' time frame, the FAA was really created. So we're very, very proud of our heritage and proud that Senator Mike Monroney was from Oklahoma, and that is our namesake, and that's where that comes from. And it's a big part of our heritage. Okay. If you go on, okay, this is a pictorial of the Aeronautical Center. So as you can see, the Aeronautical Center is a very, very large campus. It's over 1,100 acres. It's over 130 different buildings, 3.3 million square feet of space. And what's most interesting is when you look at this picture, every aspect of aviation that the Federal Aviation Administration oversees and regulates and controls, every aspect is done here at the Aeronautical Center. It's the only place across the FAA that we can say that. And many of the things that are done for the FAA are only done in Oklahoma at this facility. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that and kind of share that with you. I'd kind of like to start from, the big picture of how we fit into the bigger structure. And so we're part of the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation has 55,000 employees, an operating budget of around $70 billion. And it ranges with 13 different operating modes, and they range from very, very small to large. So you've got small ones like RITA and Federal Railroads that have like 500 people or so, all the way up to the FAA that has around 1,000 people. So we are the largest operating mode for the Department of Transportation. The overall budget for the FAA is $16 billion, or around $16 billion out of the $70 billion budget. The biggest piece of the budget for the Department of Transportation is actually federal highways. So the Aeronautical Center is pretty large. Rory talked about some of the stats. With all the employees that we have a very high focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. So we hire a lot of engineers, we have doctors, we have researchers, we have a lot of CPAs, financial specialists, logisticians, those types of resources. And there's over $1 billion of the money from the FAA and through other government agencies that run through the Aeronautical Center, with an overall economic impact of around $1.65 billion. So when we talk about the Federal Aviation Administration, we like to describe it in terms of what we call as the National Airspace System. So I mentioned that there was over 320,000 different registered aircraft. Well, at any given day, there's around 85,000 flights that are in the air. So that's managing around 2.5 million passengers, going to almost 20,000 different airports. So it equates to around 29 million square feet of airspace that's being controlled. So it's a lot of different things. So our national airspace system, it's not any one thing, it's all the technology, the radar equipment, the nav aids equipment, all the regulations and procedures, all the people, and all the facilities like the airports. All of that together is what we call as the national airspace system that we oversee and control as part of the FAA. Another way to look at our national airspace system is to kind of think about flight from a takeoff to a landing perspective. And we impact every aspect of this flight. So if you think about in pre-flight, when a commercial carrier has their aircraft and they're ready to do something, before they're ever able to put that aircraft on the tarmac and coming up to the gate, there's an aviation safety inspector that works with the commercial airlines. I don't know if you're aware, but all the aviation safety inspectors are actually trained at the Aeronautical Center in Oklahoma. When you get on an airplane and you start looking at all the safety features that are there, we have the oxygen masks that come down, we have the emergency lighting, even have the fabric on the seats. The research that was done around that technology and some of the design was done at the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute here in Oklahoma. When the pilot starts and they move back from the tarmac, the first thing they do is talk to the air traffic controllers. Did you know that all the air traffic controllers are actually trained in Oklahoma for the FAA? And as they take off on their descent, they're using all different kinds of equipment, between nav aids equipment, instrument landing equipment, radar equipment, comm equipment. All of that equipment for the FAA is actually repaired in Oklahoma at the Monroney Aeronautical Center. And even the configuration control of that equipment is done through a group called Second Level Engineering in Oklahoma. So we have a very large impact. And as the pilot's flying across the sky and he's using different charts, the Aeronav Products Division at the Oklahoma City at the Aeronautical Center is the one that updates those charts. Even the tail numbers on the aircraft, the registration of the tail numbers is done just at Oklahoma City. So we have a lot of impact, as you can see, all the way through every aspect of flight. And that's what we call as part of taking care of the NAS. We also have a very diverse customer base. So, you know, we support the FAA as a whole, but what many people don't realize is the Department of Defense is a big customer of ours as well. So radar equipment, surveillance equipment, we help support a lot of their equipment, and also Customs and Border Protection. When they're out on the border for the northern and the southern borders, a lot of this equipment that's being installed across the nation, we are actually doing the maintenance, repair, and configuration control of that equipment. So we've done about $165 million worth of business for Customs and Border Protection, and over the next few years, some of the projections cumulatively is for that to be over $1 billion. So we're very excited, and it's a growth area for us. And there's many other customers. Over 60 different federal agencies are supported through the Aeronautical Center. One of the things we're very proud of, too, is we have a special designation across federal government in financial management. It's called being a designated shared service provider, and OMB selected 4 government agencies out of all the different agencies that were doing financial services, and we were selected as one of them. And so what that means is they're pushing other cabinet level agencies to us, and we're supporting the whole Department of Transportation for financial management services. It's an exciting arena for us as well. But the Aeronautical Center is very, very large, and I don't want to just talk about it. I'd like you to see some pictures. So what we'd like to do is to run a short video and kind of show you a little bit more about the center.
Whether it's training, IT and financial services, maintenance and support, human factors and medical research, or flight inspections, there's a lot going on at the center. The Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center is just west of the Will Rogers World Airport in Oklahoma City. We have over 5,000 employees and contractors and over 1,000 students. And MMAC has over 130 buildings on 1,100 acres.
The FAA Logistics Center is at the center of supply chain management for the National Airspace System, also referred to as the NAS. We are the only FAA facility that does maintenance, repair, and overhaul, or MRO, for NAS systems and equipment, including on-site support and emergency restoration. We support over 45,000 air traffic control facilities worldwide and manage over $760 million in inventory. We also provide supply chain management, engineering, and technical services for our fastest growing customer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
The FAA Academy is at the center of aviation education. We are the primary provider of training for all new air traffic controllers, graduating over 1,200 per year. And we train the technicians responsible for maintaining National Airspace System equipment worldwide. We train approximately 76,000 students a year using a traditional classroom environment as well as through distance learning.
The Enterprise Services Center, or ESC, is at the center of financial and IT services in federal government. ESC is one of only 4 shared service providers authorized to provide financial services to U.S. government agencies. ESC is also one of only 6 information system security shared service providers.
The Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, or CAMI, is at the center of medical certification, education, and human factors and medical research in support of aviation safety. We oversee the medical examination of all U.S. civil aviation pilots, and we have several state-of-the-art facilities that allow us to test specific aspects of aviation and space safety.
The Air Traffic Organization Flight Program Operations Service Unit is responsible for all aspects of the FAA flight program, including operations and maintenance of the FAA's fleet of 46 aircraft. Our primary missions include flight inspection, training, research and development, and disaster response transportation.
We've already mentioned several organizations, but there's a lot more going on at the center. Here at the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center, we perform critical functions that help keep our national airspace safe for the traveling public. And whether we work in IT, accounting, engineering, logistics, education, or medical research, we're proud of what we do here at the center.
So thank you. As you can see, there's a pretty large footprint, a lot of diversity in what we do. So at this time, I'd like to invite Keith DeBerry, who's the director of the Academy, Randy Burke, who's the director of the Logistics Center, and Dr. Hackworth, who's the manager at our CAMI, Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, up onto the stage. I'm sure you guys want to hear from other panelists as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Keith to talk a little bit more about the Academy.
Mike's working. Good afternoon. How's everyone? How's the meal? Good? Good. First of all, let me say that we really appreciate this opportunity. As I shared with one gentleman earlier, we absolutely need all the friends that we can get. Relationships are what cause things to move forward in business and in government. My name is Keith DeBerry, and I have the distinct pleasure of being the director of the FAA Training Academy. The FAA Training Academy is a premier training institution that provides technical training not only to air traffic controllers, because we hear a lot about air traffic controllers, but anyone that touches the national aerospace system, to include technicians that maintain the equipment for communication and navigation, aviation safety inspectors, and engineers, which we hire with a lot of experience, a lot of flight hours, and we bring them in and teach them the regulatory underpinnings of the Federal Aviation Regulations and ask them to go out and become regulators. Everything about, from the design, the manufacture, the first flight of a new aircraft, we are actively engaged in that. We also teach airport inspectors, we certify them. We also not only provide FAA employees safety training or technical training, we also provide other governmental agencies. And special note of that is CBP, Custom and Border Protection. And why is that important? Custom and Border Protection is very important in today's times. They're deploying a lot of equipment to the borders for surveillance activities, and we're actually instructing new employees on how to use that equipment. So that's pretty important. So we do that, all that aviation training, for not only our own people, other government agencies, but also the aviation industry as a whole. A lot of our students in residence students come from the airlines. They actually come from facilities like AAR across the airport from where we are. So we are the cradle of aviation training. So we do that with 300 full-time faculty, which is augmented a lot of times by contractors from 300 to 600. So at any given time, we could have 900 faculty providing aviation training day and night. So we do about 20,000 students a year who are in resident and they actually come to Oklahoma City. Think about the influence Oklahoma City projects not only across the U.S., but across the world. So a number that I think you will find interesting, the travel budget for those 20,000 people are approximately $70 million a year. $70 million that those students spend in our hotels, our rental car companies, our eating establishments, our shopping, and just basically they get the great hospitality from Oklahoma. International students, you would not believe how enthralled they are with the culture in Oklahoma. And I hear about it all the time. One of the things that I really want to talk about is what we call the jewel in the crown, if you will. International Training Division has trained 172 countries in the world. And you might think to yourself, why is that really important? To train foreign entities, travel there, or have them come here. Why is that important? I would submit to you today, the aviation system in the U.S. is the gold standard for the world. Everyone wants to emulate us when it comes to aviation safety. And it's important as we bring those people here, we establish relationships because a lot of the alumni go back to their country and in years to come, becoming in very influential positions across the world in aviation safety. So we are the safest we have ever been since the inception of safety. I need to knock on wood. So, and that's not by accident. So, you know, the influence that we project across the U.S. or across the world, domestic influence we project is important. But I always say it's more important because Oklahoma is projecting influence across 172 countries, whether we go there or whether they come here. And after they hear, especially me with the accent, I don't have an accent. Not from Texas. So we projecting, that's really, really important about projecting that influence and basically helping them increase their level of safety, because at some point in time, if you travel international, you may or may not be on a U.S. registered carrier. So that's really important. So we do those kinds of things to project and influence across the world. So one of the things that we have as an obstacle is always trying to stay on the cutting edge of technology to provide that aviation training, the aviation safety training. So with a diverse student population that we have Gen Xers, we have people going through air traffic training, we have more seasoned individuals like myself that have some challenges with computers and those kinds of things. So we have to look at technology to be able to provide that more efficiently, more effectively, and more realistically. So one of the things that we've done, and I think you'll be glad to hear this, one of the things we've done is we've established a cohort with Dr. Hackworth and her research facility, Oklahoma University, and Oklahoma State University. And we've actually got a $5 million grant to look at research and do research around human performance and technical training. So some of the things that we're looking at right now is virtual reality, is to be able to put students into a real world environment for them to use the training they just received and to make decisions predicated on the training that they've had. So if they make a mistake, it's kind of like a pilot in a simulator. You just push the big red button and you restart everything again. So that's some of the things that we're trying to do. We're using Adobe Connect, we're using Blackboard, much like a lot of universities are doing right now, to make sure that we are good stewards of your taxpayer dollars and my taxpayer dollars. We're very sensitive and we're always looking for efficiencies and effective ways to do training in more cost-effective ways. So some of the things that we've done, we've joined that cohort or that center of excellence around human performance and technical training with Dr. Hackworth and her staff. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hackworth to talk about the research projects that she's currently got going on and talk about some of the valuable things that we've actually, nuggets we've pulled from that research that we've actually put into training and that we're actually putting into the operational environment. Thank you, Dr. Hackworth.
Well, thanks, Keith. I appreciate that. And thank you again for this opportunity. As you've heard, air travel is relying upon a number of systems. And like many of the industries that you represent, there's the technical aspects, that's the hardware and the equipment part. Then you have the organizational pieces, that might be like the policies, procedures, and in our case, regulations. And then there's human involvement. That's really the focus for us at CAMI. Humans are integral to every aspect of aviation, but they are also the highest localized source of risk. We're fully aware of that. Michelle mentioned the high number of operations that happen every day. 85,000 flights, 2.5 million passengers, most of which now, luckily, are not focused on, I hope we make it. They're more focused on will we make it there on time. We haven't lost our focus. We've stayed focused on, we want you to make it there safely. The 270 plus folks that we have at CAMI, they're physicians, engineers, researchers, pilots, educators. They all know that their job is to manage risk. We do that through 3 missions at CAMI, that of certification, education, and research. By certification, there are over 560,000 certified airmen in the United States. We provide training to those pilots and air crew members. The medical standards for pilots, they increase in rigor the higher that you go in terms of what you want to do in your airplane. Your commercially certified or ATP certified airplane have rigorous standards that they must meet medically to perform as a pilot, and they are monitored regularly. Your air traffic controllers have medical standards that they must adhere to, and they're monitored regularly. In our education function, we perform outreach to pilots and to crew members. Last year, we educated 2,800 commercial airmen and over 2,200 general aviation pilots. Michelle mentioned some of the physiological training that takes place at CAMI. We provide training on hypoxia, spatial disorientation, and also safety and evacuation and how to do so in the most efficient way. In our research area, we not only provide data to inform regulations, but we also work with industry to provide enabling data so that they can expand their operations. That's a cost savings to us as citizens. If we don't have to put every airport equipped with technology and put it on the ground, but in fact can use it within the airplane, that saves us money. And it also is safe and efficient. This morning before coming here, I actually briefed a group that's at CAMI in my division we're hosting. It's on sensor-based technology. We have folks from all around the world there today working together, partnering, industry competitors partnering together to figure out how to work with the FAA to, in fact, do things safely and to utilize that technology. So I mentioned that we perform research to inform safety regulations. Part of what we do is we look at how to exit an aircraft the most efficient and safest way. Did you know that all of your carriers, United States carriers, they have to demonstrate that passengers can exit out of an aircraft within 90 seconds before the FAA will certify that airplane. And we are really known at CAMI as the evacuation experts of the world. Like Keith, we host a variety. I mentioned this morning we have some folks. Last year alone, 89 different countries came to CAMI, or we visited with them to teach them about aerospace medicine, about certification, about education. They're interested. They want to know how to implement that into their country. And it's best for all of us that they know and come to the best in order to do that. In addition to evacuating the aircraft, I know you've all heard, if you'll look in the seat pocket in front of you, we inform how to properly and most effectively provide you those pictures and when to do that. Take a look at it, okay? Don't try to do it on the fly if there was ever a chance that you needed to evacuate quickly. So we provide the data and the guidance in order to do that. In addition, you saw in the video the ATD, we call them dummies when nobody's listening, but they edit the anthropomorphic test devices. And we do that to look at seat testing and also brace positions and injury impact within various aircraft. If they want to change the seat orientation or carriers are interested in trying to put more seats in, what really is realistic in time of doing that. In addition, I mentioned the enabling technology. This is enhanced flight vision systems. And this provides a way for carriers to be able to land in degraded visual conditions with using technology, or perhaps even in those airports that lack the infrastructure necessary. Again, it's an enabler. Speaking of enabling technology, Keith mentioned our virtual reality. So I don't know how many of you have tried this. You can. I don't get any plug for this. Up at Quail Springs, there is the Verena. So I think they have the Vive there. But it's HoloLens, Oculus Rift. I don't know if you got one for Christmas or gave one to your children, grandchildren. And this is a way for us to simulate reality. Companies are using this to train. Boeing uses this in their maintenance capacity. And so we're working with the Academy to see if, through distance learning, if you were donning the goggles and someone else was donning goggles elsewhere, you can actually go through the different methods that may be needed for maintaining equipment. This is the HoloLens here that she's using. Up in the right there, that is an EEG cap, I don't know if you're familiar, and the person working with biomedical engineering at the University of Minnesota is actually controlling that drone by gesturing. So they move their arms in certain ways. They're not touching any kind of joystick or anything, and they're able to fly that drone around. So that impact of 1 million drones, well, now we'll have even other technologies. So we have to remain agile. Although our focus is on safety, we have to remain agile because the new technology is coming and it's changing. There are various ways in which medicine, nanomedicine, nanoparticles, those of you in the audience that are in this industry, you know these things are coming. We have to be aware because pilots, even from other countries, are going to present and maybe fly in our airspace with these different devices these days. The last thing, I like it only because, partly because it lets me say finger wagging in a talk, and most of the time I don't get to say that. So it is, in fact, a way to gesture, and if it's paired with your smartphone, it's a way where you could write in the air and it would appear on your smartphone, or you could, in fact, do different gesturing to make certain apps do different things. So technology is changing. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. So for us at CAMI, our focus really is on the human. But in this system, in most systems, humans are interfacing with technology, with equipment within the national airspace. And with that, that brings me to Randy Burke. Randy's in charge of the equipment that really is all over the national airspace system. So, Randy?
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Randy Burke. I'm the Director of the Logistics Center. And as Keith mentioned, his team is responsible for the training of the air traffic controllers. They're also responsible for the training of almost 6,000 field technicians that support all of the equipment maintenance. And Carla and her team, they do a lot of the man-machine interface and all the good things that we train correctly on the right equipment. But you don't have a NAS unless you have the equipment. So it's all about logistics. Logistics after birth, everything is logistics. Logistics is a key part of the system, but all of these things working together are what makes the system. So there are approximately 66,000 part numbers that we're responsible for. Ray mentioned that in his initial remarks. Those 66,000 part numbers are part of a system, or systems. There's over 200 systems in the NATS at multiple locations across the United States and 22 countries. So those 66,000 part numbers, there's subcomponents, big components. Some components are as small as a dime, some are as big as a house. So it runs the gamut of those. Those 200 systems, they all have to be working in concert in an integrated manner. So those 66,000 part numbers, there is a methodology to make sure that the right part is part of the right system. It's configured correctly so it operates in the manner that it was designed, so it gets the outcome that training does and that the person who is operating the system is expected. Those 66,000 part numbers, there's about 5,000 that here in Oklahoma City, the Logistics Center, we're the sole source, repair source for those systems. So that's 5,000. We use a mix of organic and contract work across the gamut of those part numbers. Those 200 systems, think about it, we need to cue another airplane to fly by right now. So, surveillance, radar. Radar is what will identify the targets in the sky to track an airplane. So while that is being tracked by a radar system, that system collects information that is transmitted and turned into data that's displayed for the air traffic controllers to watch and control the flight while it's en route. There are other radar systems that track it while it's en route. And when you get to the destination of your flight, there's more equipment that will navigation aids throughout the country to get you to the place that you want to go to. And depending on weather, there's lighting systems and instrument landing systems that get you safely on the ground. So once you're on the ground, there's even more systems that air traffic controllers or ground controllers talk to the pilots, direct them to the right gate. They use radios. All of those things that enable that communication, that tracking, that system from takeoff to landing, all of those parts and all of the airfields across the United States, it's painted white and orange or orange and white. All of those systems are touched by the people here at the Logistics Center. So that is a huge impact to the aviation safety of the country, and we also support 22 countries internationally. So one of our biggest challenges that we have, well, new technology is cool. It is very cool. There's a lot of new things on the horizon, but there's still old technology that we have to sustain. So there's not enough money in the world to turn everything into new technology overnight. So there has to be a series of things that have to happen to sustain that older technology. Obsolescence is one of the biggest challenges we have. So how do we insert maybe new technology into older systems to keep the same form, fit, and function? Because some of that old technology is very reliable, and it will be in the new systems for some period of time. It's not going to change out overnight. So that obsolescence is that technology insertion that we're looking, for partnerships, new ideas. That is where there are a number of things that we do with industry and local businesses as well. And one of those good ideas to support those other systems, because there's an economic return. Everybody wants the new thing, but we still have to sustain the old thing as well. And with that obsolescence, we work with second level engineering. Second level engineering is another entity that's at the Monroney Center. So one of the very cool things about the Monroney Center is about 98% of the systems that are in the NAS are present at the Monroney Center. Either the Logistics Center owns it, Second Level Engineering owns it, or the Academy owns it. It is these systems that are out in the NAS, controlling flight right now, that are present right here. So what a cool collection of brain power, that if we have an issue that we have to deal with, we can plug in, experiment, and we have all of the right people to solve an issue almost real time, and even implement training changes or experiment the physiological things to make sure that we get the solutions done right. Michelle mentioned we have a number of other customers, and the reason we have a number of other customers is that budgets aren't infinite. So for the Department of Defense, we support the long-range radar, which about 137 flights. I think we have a picture of this long that around the border of the United States and a few places overseas. But instead of DoD standing up all of that capability on their own, we do that for them, along with other customers, Customs and Border Protection. Like the mobile surveillance unit on this truck right here, there are a number of those assets, fixed towers, mobile towers. Customs and Border Protection did not have its own organic capability to do a lot of these things. So we do that for them. So instead of duplicating that logistics support and brain power, we roll that into what we're doing for an efficiency for government to save costs, because it would cost all of us more to stand that up in 3 different locations. So having said that, I think I covered everything. And Michelle, did I miss anything that I should have said?
No, I think that was great. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. So this was just a snapshot of some of the organizations at the center, but we really wanted to open this up for questions. So Roy, thank you for coming up, and we're going to open this up now this time.
Well, thank you all very, very much. I'm certain most all of you knew every bit of this. So, better? Test? Yes, okay. So you probably don't have the need to ask a lot of questions, but just in case some of you might have a question about this, this is the time to get it answered. So we're opening the floor. We have staff that has microphones, so if you'll speak into the mic.
We're very lucky in Oklahoma to have the FAA here. There's several businesses and law firms that have departments that do tunnel work, and they can do that here because the facility's here. Talk to them in private, and a lot of them are nervous that if that system ever gets put out on the internet or open, that a lot of that work would leave, go to other places. Is there any thought of that, or are we going to be safe to keep the jobs here? Or how's that work?
So are you talking about the title work specifically, or
Yes.
jobs in general?
Like title work. So there's title companies, escrow companies, some law firms and departments that focus on that kind of work. So anybody who flies a plane anywhere in America, they have companies here in Oklahoma that actually go to the FAA and do the research on that. A lot of them are nervous that if that ever gets decentralized, that we could lose lose those jobs and those businesses. Is there any talk of that, or do we have anything to worry?
So I would say my crystal ball as far as the future is not perfect, but I will tell you we've enjoyed a very close collaboration here with this community, and our success has been in strong part to things like what you're describing. And so our legal office and the title and the work with the registry is a very integral part to make that all happen. And so we're very interested in making sure that people understand the connectivity. A lot of what we do and we're able to accomplish at the FAA, even at the center, is based on the organizations working together and working directly with the community. And so we are very focused on trying to make sure we educate those who are making these kind of decisions so that they understand the connectivity and that the ultimate success has been based on this partnership.
There's one right over here.
Just go for it, we don't have time. Okay. I was just curious how the FAA interfaces with the NTSB. Could someone speak to that, please?
That's a great question. So the NTSB has a responsibility in any aircraft accident, especially if there's loss of life, whether it is a general aviation or commercial, to do an investigation. And they will dispatch an NTSB, and I'm sure you are very familiar with the process. So when the FAA is a partner to that investigation, and the only reason I know that is because I worked in the field for a number of years as an aviation safety inspector, done a lot of aircraft accident investigations, and there's 9 responsibilities the FAA, so we're there as a party to that, but since the NTSB is actually sent to the site, they are what they refer to as the investigator in charge, and they deal with the press and the final report and those kinds of things. The investigative report, the 9 items that we have responsibility for, is part and parcel into that final investigation report. So there's a lot of recommendations, and sometimes there is, how should I put this? There's some controversy over final cause of accident, contributing cause of accident. And of course, when that final report does come out, in a lot of instances, there are some areas of recommended improvement for the FAA. And we're answerable for those, basically, to look at those and provide a report back. Carla, today.
A very good answer, but I don't want to use that. So, no, that's exactly right. So we, partner is a little bit of a strong word, but we certainly assist when requested. We have folks at CAMI that provide data upon request, because we, in addition, I didn't mention, some of the things we do are toxicology. So we have a toxicology division at CAMI, and we'll provide the results and findings from that to the NTSB for every accident that occurs in the United States.
Did that answer your question?
One back here.
Patrick Rago, 2 quick questions. One is, when I was last in your field, obviously wind energy is a big player in Oklahoma and across the country increasingly, but it has potentially devastating impacts to radar and all of those other type of things. And so I'm a little bit dated in terms of how we are addressing that. And the second question is, we all have to turn off our cell phones when we fly. Can you speak to some of the negative, just some of the negative stories about why that is so, and scary stories for us?
So you can have the human person talk about wind. I can't speak to the wind technology, so, I mean, I know we're aware of the fact that there's been interferences there. I don't know if some innovations or geofencing or some other technologies have been in place to be able to protect against that. So I don't know if some type of enabling technology has been put in place to deal with that, because we've certainly had that. We've had issues with solar panels as well, having interference or causing complications on airfields. So I don't know if you want to speak to the wind. I do know with the cell phone that part of it, it really has to do with the possibility of interfering with the signals in the cockpit, particularly during takeoff and landing, and it's really much more of a protective feature. I also find it personally as welcoming for people to not be next to me talking on their cell phone during my flight. I don't know. But that's Carla, the camera. I'm looking right there. But nonetheless, it does have the potential for interference. And particularly if you had a collection, and imagine if you had 85,000 flights going and everybody had their cell phones and their iPads and everything else during those critical periods.
So I can talk a little bit about the cell phone usage. That there's a lot of differing opinions on whether it does interfere with flight controls. In the newer aircraft, there's still research going on. So that is not a dead issue. As you probably have flown recently, there was Wi-Fi offered. So there is one step toward that. Will we ever get there? I don't know, because even if there is a fraction of a possibility for that to interfere with flight control, you lose operational control of the airplane, the engineers are not going to buy off on that. And I understand it can be distressful sometimes not to be able to get your phone. I mean, I'm hooked on mine, quite frankly. First thing I do every morning when I wake up, and sometimes at night. We just need to take that into consideration as a safety issue. So there's a lot of controversy still going on. Research is still ongoing. I shared with Eddie, there's a lot of research about being able to hack into airplanes that are ongoing right now. I'm sure that, if you get Popular Science, there's a lot of discussion about that. And so there's ongoing research with the other center in Atlantic City around that.
Any other burning question up there? No, pun intended. Shirley? No? Going once? Oh, yep, come.
I'm Tom Grove, Johnson Controls. What's the number one thing, just real briefly, I'm sure you can talk all day about this, that keeps each of you up at night in your particular positions?
One of the number one things for us is around the budget and stabilization of funding. Many of you know that we're under CR right now, it expires on Friday, but we're also under our 24th reauthorization. So the FAA has not had a stable source of funding in a long, long period of time. And the reason that's important, and the reason it keeps us up at night, is that what you want as the taxpayer and what we want is to have a strategic plan, an executable strategic plan. And it makes it very, very hard to move forward with new technologies and have a strategic plan when you're not really sure what the budget's going to be. And when there are so many short-term extensions around that. So we are hopeful that we get a long-term authorization at some point, but 24 is way too many.
I have two things that are related that keep me up. One relates to obsolescence and the other is people. So I mentioned we keep old systems for a long time. I'm worried about sustaining a pipeline of trained individuals that want to do this kind of work, because it is technical work, but a lot of it is not high tech or it's not new tech, so it's not fun and exciting, but it still needs to be done. So having that trained pipeline of personnel that are interested in doing something that is very important, that's what keeps me awake.
I'm kind of like Michelle about the stream of steady funding. Back in, I think it was 2013, we had sequestration. We actually stopped all aviation safety training. The system continued, so we actually introduced a large amount of risk into the national aerospace system. So there was a lot of, safes that were there to prevent a lot of things, but it created and with the air traffic controller workforce aging and nearing retirement, there is a huge push to get people through, and if we continue to have sequestrations or inability to train around funding, that introduces a lot of risk into the national aerospace system through a variety of things. So aviation safety inspectors were not working, basically. So aircraft companies couldn't certify parts or airplanes. Things couldn't basically get done. They couldn't sell an airplane or transfer an airplane. So there was a lot of work stoppage And I think you can see that it introduced a myriad of risk into the system itself that we are still feeling the effects of today. So that steady stream of funding is oh so important to maintain the safety record that we currently have. I would hate to see anything happen as we are in the safest period we've ever been with aviation on some risk that someone introduced into the system not knowing what the outcome of that would be. That's what keeps me up at night.
So, and the benefit of going last, certainly the budget and the crisis with the budget that we have, and being in R&D, sometimes, especially within government, you don't see the return on investment ever so quickly, right? And so we do our best to do that, but we've achieved a great level of safety, as I hope we've convinced you and you've personally experienced. And part of that is due to a lot of the advances in technology, and the equipment that we use has higher degrees of reliability now. That's part of how we've achieved such a great safety record. Such that now, in the errors that do occur in aviation, we found that about 80% are human errors. And so it's a small number of errors, but when you look at just the proportion, and so to have any impact in us to be able to do our job effectively and partner with other research labs, I believe that's what concerns me.
Last question.
Two quick questions. Any thoughts on drones? And I don't know if you guys saw the picture of the Thunder airplane when it landed. And then two, any growth plans around campus or anything like that?
Our growth?
There we go. Okay. Our growth is really with a lot of different federal agencies like Customs and Border Protection. So we really do see a big potential for growth. We're talking to them right now, an interagency agreement that could be between $1 billion and possibly $2 billion. And so that could add a lot of jobs. We have a lot of work to do with them and talk about what that looks like, but it's a great potential for us. And I'm going to let Keith or Carlo talk about drones.
I knew someone was going to ask the question about drones. Thank you. So that controversy continues. I will tell you that the FAA, from a lobbying perspective, being lobbied very hard by organizations like Amazon and other organizations, because they have a vision. Even FedEx and UPS has a vision of delivering your product to your doorstep via drone. But I think, what was the number of drones that have grown dramatically? Over 1 million. Do you have a drone?
No.
So there's a lot of controversy around that, and I think we need to be very careful about the rules and regulations that we put in place. And this is my opinion, and it's predicated on 42 years in aviation. We need to be very careful about the rules and regulations we put into place, and we need to do hazard identification, safety risk analysis on what that's going to look like. Because at the end of the day, 737 ingest a CJI drone, you're probably going to lose that engine. If you lose that engine on takeoff, rollout, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. So we really need to be careful about those kinds of things. I think there's a place for drones. There's drones being currently used in a lot of industries to look at power lines, basically petroleum pipes and those kinds of things, and there is a place for that. But we're being pushed as an organization very, very hard by industry, because industry sees explosive growth in that and a lot of revenue that they can gain from using those kinds of things. But you put 1 million drones in the air, along with commercial aviation with passengers on board, that could be havoc across the system. So that continues. There's a lot of effort going on. There is a recently stood up organization that is deals exclusively with UAVs. They've got a director, a deputy director, and they've got a whole staff that deals with all of that. So the FAA is taking it very, very seriously, but I think we're trying to keep Pandora basically in the box until we can really make a safety analysis of that and make the right kind of rules and the right kind of policy, and still let the drone operators enjoy that hobby.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. So hopefully you've learned quite a bit today, and I'm certain each of us now have a better appreciation for really what's in our backyard here, and that being the FAA Center operating right here every day, all day. So I think the charge to all of us is to continue supporting this center as it works with pilots, with educators, with trainees from all over the world, and continues its critical work here. So do all you can to help support them, and like they said, top of mind is budget. So you know your Congress members, so talk to them. Once again, I want to thank our signature sponsor, Cox Business, and our series corporate sponsors, ADG Inc. and Guernsey. Next month's forum will feature a lineup of some of our community's brightest minds as we turn our focus to the startup community. We'll hear from a panel who will detail the tremendous momentum that is going on in our market and entrepreneurship here in Oklahoma City, including how startups are nurturing ideas and finding resources and employees. So we hope to see you right here at VAST on February 21st. You can register online today. Thank all of you for being here, and once again, thank you, panelists. We are adjourned.